I am ashamed at their behavior over this genocide, that they've sat there watching. It's shameful. It's shameful. On what basis would they be watching? Are the Palestinians not fellow Arabs? Are they not in the majority fellow Muslims? What is this about? How can you watch children starving when you've got so much money and so many resources?
Do you also harbor injury and hurt against Arab states and how they've responded to the Zionist entity? Or is there some sort of sympathy for the fact that they were also unwittingly just, this thing happened? Where do you throw responsibility with regards to them?
Yeah, that's a very important question. Look, we have to start off, and we really do have to say this, that but for the Arab states, I really don't know what would have happened to the Palestinians in 1948. We acknowledge this, and with gratitude, the so-called frontline states, that's those states bordering the new Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and further afield, Iraq, Egypt, they did offer refuge to the poor people forced out of their homes in Palestine. And in the case of Syria, for example, they really had the same rights as Syrian citizens, other than citizenship. And that was a political position, which is that if you give the Palestinians citizenship, then they cease to be Palestinians in a way. So that was a studied behavior. However, for the rest of it, they received free education, they received healthcare, they received somewhere to live. We cannot possibly deny this. And Jordan, at the moment, is home to the largest number of Palestinian refugees. And these things are uncontestable. But for the Arab states, I don't know what would have happened to the Palestinians. Having said that, over time, I think the Arabs made some kind of decision at some point that they could not conquer Israel. They could not attain military victory over Israel. And the big example of that is Egypt. And so, in a way, what's the alternative? We try to make peace with it. And that's what happened Egypt was the first state to make peace with Israel, 1978, 79. And it was followed by Jordan in 1994. Some of the others toyed with and did, in fact, have unofficial channels open between them and Israel. But, having made that decision that they could not fight Israel, they opted for something that really wasn't a good alternative either, which is to keep up a public discourse which was hostile to Israel, but meanwhile accepting and dealing with Israel on a practical basis. That partly led to Morocco, states like Morocco, which had created unofficial channels with Israel. But it also led much later on to the Abraham Accords, which is where the Gulf states went along with normalization of relationship with Israel, guided by the United States. But this behavior was influenced by another factor, which is that the United States was so obviously a supporter of Israel and a defender of Israel. And the United States was the power that these Arab kingdoms, and Arab states wanted a closer relationship with. So really, in a way, they got the message that in order for the US to be nice to you, you had to be nice to Israel. So I remember, in the 1950s, 60s, there was a woman's magazine called Woman's Own. And this had a thing in it where there was articles which said, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. And I'm afraid what the Arabs were doing is the way to the United States is through Israel. And, that's the thing. Now, what do I feel about that? I feel very badly about that, because it shows a fundamentally very poor understanding of what Zionism is, and even worse, the belief that they are safe from the Zionists. You see, it's one thing to say there is this state practicing a particular ideology, which we might or might not agree with. But it's another thing to say, that ideology may reach out its tentacles towards you. That's the bit they don't seem to understand. That the more you prostrate yourself before Israel and its major sponsor, the United States, the more they'll walk all over you. So of course I'm disappointed. I am ashamed at their behavior over this genocide, that they've sat there watching. It's shameful. It's shameful. On what basis would they be watching? Are the Palestinians not fellow Arabs? Are they not in the majority fellow Muslims? What is this about? How can you watch children starving when you've got so much money and so many resources? At one point I used to think to myself, what would happen if they sent a delegation from each of those Arab states and just went into Gaza? I mean, the Israelis can bomb the hell out of all sorts of things, but I think they would hesitate before bombing representatives from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE. Why not go in there and just open the door and let the aid in? Sadly, it hasn't happened. And they sit by and watch. What can I tell you? I feel I am ashamed. I'm ashamed of this.
Do you think? I mean, it sounds like it's sort of like the way they've behaved in the last 20 months is a low for their behavior with regards to the Palestinian cause. But I mean, again, I hear everything you're saying, and I agree with it to a very large extent. But do you have some sympathy for the fact that they don't want to risk a regional war, and that Israel, and especially with Trump and Biden, are in a way out of control, and they need to mitigate against that? I mean, how does that? These are very difficult questions, and just what's your response to that?
Well, I think it's a factor, definitely, and it will have occurred to them, and I don't blame them, because if you look at Israel's behavior and the U.S. Unstinting support, they would be scared, and I think they are scared. To be fair, I think they're afraid. They fear the United States very, very much. They fear antagonizing America in case it retaliates in ways which they're not prepared for. But I would say the major part of the way in which they would be afraid to lose U.S. protection is that many of those regimes are kept in place largely with American help. And so they would have a terrible fear of losing that protection and then facing it. But on another front, it's true. I'm sure that it has occurred to many of them that you might start a regional war, and you don't know how that would end. And their whole experience, the region's experience of Israel, has been that it is extremely aggressive and very belligerent. So, they would be afraid to do that. But you see, I can't fully excuse it, really, because you don't do that when things have happened. You need to anticipate. You know, if you're a properly functioning state, properly functioning government, what you need to do is to identify the risks around you and the dangers around you and take action to protect yourself. Now, I think they certainly are aware that Israel is dangerous, and they think that they have a protection in being very nice to the United States. But I'm afraid it's very naive. You know, I mean, by the way, most recently, there has been this spectacle of the Gulf states entertaining President Trump. This man has been aiding a genocide. This man is complicit in the genocide of fellow Arabs. Why is he being feted? Why is he being spoiled? Why give him presents? What's that based on? You see, you can't help but you see that, and it's deeply shaming. That's all I can say.